The other thing with the max effort days is you do want to break records, but you don't want to go ape shit about it. You want to break the record by 5 pounds and be done. If you break a record by 5 pounds and it's easy, just be done. Don't go up again and try to break the record by 25, 50 pounds. Just 5 pounds, be done. That way you know you got.
Get the fuck up. Simon says, get the fuck up. Throw your hands in the sky.
All right, the first question we have is using a conjugate style template, but on max effort days using the competition lifts and attempting rep PRs instead of a heavy single with some type of variation of the competition lift. I'm not a fan of that. The reason why I'm not a fan of that is, and Louis covered this extensively throughout his podcast and his writing as well, there's multiple reasons for this. The max effort work, you really need to strain. It should be a 1 rep max. The only variation that I like to give with that would be beginners who their technique just isn't that good and taking it out to a 3 rep max, but using some type of variation of the movement, squat, bench, or deadlift, and changing as frequently as you possibly can, with the goal being to try to change the exercise every week. The more exercises that you're able to rotate in, the less stress it's going to put on your joints, the less stress it's going to put on your central nervous system, your muscular system. Even the slightest change can have a big difference as far as wear and tear goes. Earlier in my career, when I was doing max effort work, one of the bigger mistakes I made was to try to cycle the same exercise for 2 weeks. And at the same time, a lot of coaches will have beginners cycle the exercise for 2 to 3 weeks, hitting a 5 rep max, a 3 rep max, then a 1 rep max, and then moving on to the next exercise. I think that's good. I think that works because the first week allows you to become more in tune with how to do the movement. The second week allows you to strain a little bit, and then the third, to kind of max out on it and to set some type of record for that movement, then move out. That's all fine and good as long as the end goal of the whole thing is to be able to change the exercise every week to keep you from being stale. Keep in mind that you are working at 90% plus. Usually it's going to be 100 or 105% every single time you're doing an exercise. So the more you can change that exercise, the better it's going to be. The problem with using a competitive lift for that is there's mental aspects to where if you start missing weights on the competitive lifts, you're going to fuck with your own head, and things are going to be harder to overcome because of past experience with that weight. And keep in mind, the goal of the max effort day is to strain. That's what it is. That's what the max effort method is intended to do, is to strain the body, to teach you to strain and to strain for a given period of time. So you want to be able to have some exercises in there where you're going to strain for 3, maybe 4 seconds. Some you may strain for 1 second, but you have to be able to strain. Some movements, if you're doing a max effort exercise against bands or something that's going to make it even the time under tension even longer, will actually begin to teach you how to think when you strain, which is a whole nother component with a benefit of doing the max effort work. Is when you compete, if the weight does get hard, you're going to be in a zone for one thing, and you may not be able to think at all. But in training, you're not going to always be in that zone. You're going to be in a competitive or in a training state, not a competitive state. So the more times that you're able to strain in a training state for an extended period of time, you're going to be able to think of what to do to be able to finish the weight instead of just missing the weight. So that will become an automatic thing when it comes to the competition, and be able to strain and be able to kind of figure out what to do instead of panic to be able to actually make the lift. The other thing with using the competition lifts or max effort work is you're always training at 90% and above, and you can't do that. Your body just can't handle that. There has to be some type of wave loading with that. So now if you were to replace the max effort day with a sub-maximal day, then the answer would be different, and you would be able to rotate that in effectively, but we're speaking just max effort work here. So the movements that you put in there need to be somewhat similar, and have some correspondence to what the main lifts are, but it doesn't have to 100% mimic. You know, a lot of people are getting too tied up and they're trying to make those exercises identical to the squat, bench, and deadlift, and it doesn't always necessarily have to be. The only thing that I will say that, you know, if you're going to use good mornings for max effort, I don't like the idea of using singles for that. It's better to use those for triples or fives, which really isn't max effort work because you're falling out of the 90% range. But it does give you a wave off, or it gives you everything cycles and pendulums. It gives you a cycle away from the heavier work with that. Some other things that I found with the cycling of max effort exercises is you can strategically cycle different exercises that are going to have a different influence on workload based upon the bar that you're using. So, for example, if you're very strong using a man array on a high box, and that's one of your max effort exercises, and your max on that is 500 pounds, where your max with a safety squat bar is 300 pounds. When you start comparing or adding up the workload of all the sets and reps that are 50% and above, you can still train at that 100% max range, but your workload is going to change tremendously because your strength of that movement has changed tremendously. So you can waive the workload and get a benefit out of that. So that's one way to waive some of the max effort stuff. Another way to waive that is to toss in some concentric only work, which would be a suspended good morning, a pin press. Pin pulls are a little bit different because deadlifts will fuck you up a lot. But those are concentric only, which you take the eccentric out, makes it a little bit easier to recover from. So if you start to feel a little beat up and you think it's due to the max effort work, which usually you can tell because the max effort work's going to start slipping, it's going to be harder to knock out those 5-pound records that you normally would, then jump to something that's concentric only, or go to the good mornings, or if it's the bench press, something like high rep dumbbell bench presses. And there's a question later on about auto regulation, which I'll get into, which kind of falls into play here as well. The other thing with the max effort days is you do want to break records, but you don't want to go ape shit about it. You want to break the record by 5 pounds and be done. If you break a record by 5 pounds and it's easy, just be done. Don't go up again and try to break the record by 25, 50 pounds. Just 5 pounds, be done. That way you know you got more left in the tank, so when you cycle back through it, it's a training process. You can't, hammer your head into the wall, with 100% maximal force every single time. You want to progressively get stronger over a long period of time. It should be thought of as a multi-year plan. So it's not just this 12-week cycle that you're working on. It's training the muscular system to be able to strain and to be able to become stronger using that method. So there's a lot of variations with the max effort method, and I have articles on the site that deal directly with different ways that you can cycle the max effort method as far as the exercises and the type of straining, if it's eccentric, concentric, and even isometric, that you can kind of cycle through as well. So it's not always the same thing. What I've seen happen with people that try to use the main lifts as their max effort work is they're going to get 3 or 4 weeks in and they just die. They can't make any progress. And it's not just because it's the main lifts that we're talking about here. If you want to cycle the main lifts in every 4 or 5 weeks as you would any other max effort exercise, that's probably okay, except for the mental aspect that I started with. If you miss, you're going to potentially fuck your head up. But if you were to stay with any max effort exercise, if it's a yoke bar, if it's a 2-board press or a floor press or any of the other ones that are out there, 4 or 5 weeks, you're going to run into a wall. You just can't go 90% plus for that long a period of time with the same exercise. That's the beauty of changing the exercise every week, is you can go 90% plus every week all year if you wanted to. The best specific thing for a beginner or a novice to do is just something like, Dave, you got like 6 weeks of glycogen in your system right now. So I kind of knew it was going to be a long